Comedian and writer Russell Brand, who's by no means the first celebrity whose active sex life has led to suggestions that fathers might like to lock up their daughters. His, though unusual, in also leading to warnings that grandfathers might be kept away from the telephone. The incident 2 years ago in which he and Jonathan Ross left obscene messages on the answer phone of the actor Andrew Sachs during a Radio 2 show led to several departures from the BBC, including Brand's own resignation. His version of that headline controversy is in Bookywook 2, the follow-up to his best-selling autobiography, My Bookywook. Whereas the first memoir focused on his painful childhood and near-fatal addictions to drink and drugs, the sequel deals with a period in which he was sober and globally famous as a foppish, long-haired, soft-voiced comedian and movie star in films including Forgetting Sarah Marshall. And yet I pointed out, even this work about the good years, the final chapter reports on his recent engagement to the pop star Katy Perry, is studded with claims of derangement. Typical phrases include "the madness remains," "I am mad," and the insanity that forever lurks at the back of my consciousness.
For me, I know that there have been occasions where I've been vehement and insistent that I'm correct, and people around me have gone, no, seriously, this is definitely not right. And one of the most important lessons I've learned is to pay heed to these external voices rather than the internal ones.
Well, that's interesting, because we might have thought, having read the first book and knowing about you, that that streak was connected with the drink and the drugs and the addictions. But you make clear in this book that although the addictions have gone, are under control, that streak is still there.
I think it does. I mean, and I don't think that applies necessarily just to me. I think the received wisdom on the disease of addiction is that it continues to evolve and develop unless you have a program around it, and it will manifest upon sort of myriad objects if not correctly monitored. That, you know, so food addiction, sex addiction, drug addiction, alcohol addiction are all a result of the same condition. Ultimately, the object is not important, but the condition itself. So I think without a program, then these tendencies find an outlet.
When you wrote the book, you knew you were going to have to deal with the Jonathan Ross incident, Andrew Sachs in some way. What a lot of people will pick up on clearly is that you reveal in the book that Jonathan Ross tried to persuade you to remove those phone calls. And that again, that is the streak you have. You just thought, I want to go with this.
Yeah, I just become needlessly attacked. Also, I'm not good in confrontations. If people confront me with something, I become more steadfast and more deliberate in my position. It fortifies my beliefs. It wasn't like I madly believed they were incredibly funny. I just thought I hadn't really considered it from any other perspective than comedy and as content for a radio show. And when people said, well, maybe we should remove that, you know, because it's sort of like it's left on his answers with message and stuff, and I was like, no, it's all right, I think it'll be okay. I was sort of like flippant about it. And Jonathan, when Jonathan called, he said, do you think that we should be leaving them on there? I mean, do you think maybe we should remove it? I said, yeah, I think it's funny, really, Jonathan. And it took up like quite a lot of the radio show. It seems peculiar now, but of course at that time it was not subject to such scrutiny and hadn't been inflated to that degree.
Well, that's the other thing you say. There's a lot of remorse in this book about what happened, and you say that when it happened, you were thinking of him as Manuel the waiter from Fawlty Towers rather than an old man with a family.
I had no image of a granddad in my head. I don't sort of weren't particularly close to, well, sort of one of my grandparents I was kind of close to, but like sort of I didn't really have, that's not a reference I really have. But the reference of Manuel from Fawlty Towers, that's really a prominent archetype in my mind. I knew the words to Fawlty Towers from when I was 5, and for me, I didn't think, I was peculiarly single-minded about, oh no, it's just a funny thing to have done. And, you know, I thought that, do you know what I thought? I thought I'm going to have to end up apologising to Andrew Sachs. It is definitely rude, but I didn't think that there'd be consequences beyond that.
And one of the things that struck me, I mean, I know from other people I know have been through it, rehab, that one of the things that is encouraged, you have to face up to what you've done and take responsibility for it. And that, I guess, that is one of, I mean, very quickly you did. You resigned from Radio 2 and you did take responsibility.
Yes, I think that's part of my programme for living, is taking responsibility for my actions and making amends where possible. And it was, to tell you the truth, in this particular instance, I didn't feel that I felt that my options were limited. I only really wanted to make people laugh. I was only trying to be funny. And I thought, right, well, that's definitely not what's happening now. This is not making people laugh. It's not funny. You've got no option but to stop.
It's an incredibly candid book, particularly about sex. You go from at least one woman most days to settling down with one woman. Do you think, what was the sex an addiction as well?
I think Possibly it was compulsive, and I think that probably I just have addictive tendencies, and that which will find any outlet. Addiction defined as any behaviour compulsively indulged in spite of negative consequences. There were negative consequences. Sometimes it made me feel a bit bad about myself. Sometimes I'd pursue it instead of spending time with friends, So I guess under those terms, it was addictive behaviour.
And here's one of the great love stories that you first met your future wife when she threw a bottle at you.
Yes. What a wonderful interruption to the ordinary that was. Yes, Katy announced herself in my life by hurling a bottle at my head. So initially I felt sort of embarrassed and sort of transgressed upon and sort of slightly hot and flustered by her. And that feeling has pretty much continued.
We should make clear it wasn't in a restaurant, it was at an awards ceremony. You were rehearsing.
Yeah, at Radio City Hall in New York City. And I was showing off to the directors and the producers, and from quite a distance actually. It was an impressive throw, because I reckon it was over 30 foot away. She threw a half-full water bottle and hit me on the head. And I think, who's done that? And sort of feeling like I'm initially affronted, and how I would deal with it and what funny things I could say or how to handle the confrontation. And then she sort of ambled over very sort of laconically and confidently, but a very sort of spellbinding person, and and I got engaged in some sort of what was it, badinage, yeah, with her, and from there became enchanted.
Has she read the book, Katy?
I read most of it to her. I was the first half was prior to us meeting, but the second sort of half, maybe even 2/3, we were together some of the time, and I'd just read her what I'd written, and if we weren't together, I'd read a bit over the phone and stuff. And she kind of knows me, and she knows what I'm like. But
it ends with a threesome involving a dog. We made clear you didn't realise a dog was involved for reasons that are made clear for people who read the book. But was she okay with that kind of thing, Katy?
Katy did ask that there were a few words that I changed around there, which I think were perhaps beneficial retrospectively, because I made it a little less hard and a little less anatomically graphic. Because I kind of sometimes enjoy explicit imagery for the evocation of sort of sudden and abrupt laughter. Katy just said it, in her way, just said it's too rude and disgusting. And so I sort of toned that down. But I said, I can't take that anecdote out, it's really funny. And also I think that that's not necessarily the result of incredible decadence. I think domesticity, if you've got a pet, they come in, don't they, often. They don't know what the boundaries are. That's down to us, the humans, to impose those boundaries upon our friends.
And very early on in the book, because it is chronological, there's a conversation with Jonathan Ross when you first meet him, and he says something a lot of people will pick up on, which is that he says the thing about fame is it gives you a lot, but it takes something away from you, and you never get that back. I mean, the way you have to live now, there are people outside this building now, and your movements are tweeted all around the place. I mean, you express some dissatisfaction with it in the book, but it's a pretty horrible way to live sometimes, isn't it?
Yes, Mark, it is. And I'm only now becoming disillusioned with it, I think, partially as a consequence to having fallen in love with someone and now having something private, which can be perceived as incredibly public. But I suppose what I try to bear in mind is that I'm really in a privileged and fortunate position, and given the ecological and economical problems that we currently confront, celebrities getting in trouble by paparazzi is a small one.
How much did you construct an image? Because there's a very revealing moment when you go into audition for Forgetting Sarah Marshall, as the film turns out to be. And in effect, they throw out the characters in the script because they've got you in front of them, and they want you to play yourself with all the belts. And there's another fantastic scene in the book where you decide to go to the loo before an interview with Keith Richards, I think. Yes. And you have to get the 4 belts off, and it's all very difficult. But how much of that, all the leather and the hair and the voice and everything, how much of that was constructed?
It was a construction, but also it was legitimate. There were no sort of spin doctors and PR experts involved. I just became, I suppose...
But you were thinking about it
I was. I guess I've imbibed so much, I'm sort of, as we all are, sort of infatuated with what's around us and with what we consume through TV and media. It wasn't like I had a deliberate understanding that, if I have a haircut that people can comment on, that makes me worthy of sort of interest in. And if I wear these skin-tight trousers and demonstrably sort of rock and roll or gothic or Victorian, people understand this iconography and these semiotics and will be intrigued by it. But it turns out that did work.
Russell Brand, Bookywook 2, this time it's personal, is out in hardback now.